Healers are individuals endowed with benevolence, dedicating themselves to the welfare of others. This is the tale of a village lad who evolves into the mightiest adventurer, known as Dead End, in a small village bordering the wilderness. Leaf, a healer in this quaint rural area, is about to close shop for the day when a new customer arrives. Despite the late hour, Leaf does not show any signs of annoyance. He warmly welcomes Mrs. Merlin, attentively listens to her complaints of back pain, and promptly sets about preparing a pain relief concoction for her. Just then, his housemate Doku makes an appearance, chiding Leaf for his tardiness in preparing dinner. Her irritation is palpable as she scolds Leaf and then turns her frustration towards Mrs. Merlin, criticizing her for disregarding the closing hours and causing them inconvenience. Realizing her error in judgment, Mrs. Merlin attempts to offer her apologies. Observing his friend's excessive reaction, Leaf intercedes, urging Doku to cease her tirade and assuring her that he will immediately attend to the cooking. It's only after Leaf's intervention that Doku somewhat calms down and departs, leaving Leaf to escort Mrs. Merlin out. Doku's fiery temperament is well known to the villagers since her childhood, so they generally don't take her outbursts too seriously. However, Mrs. Merlin seizes this moment to offer Leaf some counsel. Currently, they are merely friends, but Doku is also the daughter of Leaf's mentor. Before his demise, the mentor entrusted Doku to Leaf, binding them with a betrothal pact. Mrs. Merlin expresses her concern that with Doku's fiery nature and Leaf's excessive gentleness, cohabitation might prove challenging. Occasionally, Mrs. Merlin ponders over Leaf's exceptional abilities, feeling that his talents are being underutilized in the confines of the village. She suggests that if Leaf were to venture beyond the village, his renown could potentially echo throughout the kingdom. Upon hearing this, Leaf firmly declines, expressing his deep gratitude towards his mentor who had rescued him when he was abandoned. Now, as a disciple, he feels a profound duty to remain and safeguard the shop that his mentor bequeathed to him. The following morning, while Leaf is deeply engrossed in his sleep, Doku enters his room to wake him up. She is dressed in a stunningly beautiful outfit, which confuses Leaf. This confusion quickly turns into shock when he learns that Doku is set to marry Lord Akaran that day. According to the terms of their marriage, all the family assets, including the shop, will be transferred to Akaran. Leaf is unable to come to terms with this development. He attempts to object, but realizes his solitary efforts are futile. In a surprising turn of events, Doku, displaying a trace of compassion, offers Leaf a position as her personal servant. Leaf adamantly refuses this proposal, determined to leave the place behind. As he departs, tears of frustration and helplessness stream down his face, grieving over his inability to protect his master's shop. Alone in the forest, Leaf contemplates his next steps. He briefly considers seeking refuge with Mrs. Merlin, but quickly dismisses the idea as inappropriate. Recollecting Mrs. Merlin's previous advice, Leaf is reminded that leaving the village could elevate him to a renowned healer. Lost in thought, Leaf is suddenly alerted by the scent of blood. Following the trail, he stumbles upon a scene of carnage, a group of soldiers viciously attacked by a monstrous beast, with heavy casualties. A beautiful woman from the group, in a state of desperation, implores Leaf to find a healer for the wounded soldiers. Acknowledging his own abilities as a healer, Leaf immediately springs into action, employing his medicinal skills. His efforts are nothing short of miraculous, managing to fully heal the soldiers and even reattach severed limbs, a feat that surpasses the abilities of even the most skilled healers. The woman's bodyguard, initially suspicious of Leaf's motives, cautiously advises her lady, Priscilla of the esteemed Duke Graham's family, to maintain a safe distance. However, Priscilla, overwhelmed with gratitude, disregards the caution and approaches Leaf to express her heartfelt thanks. She reveals her mission to find the legendary healer of Dead End Village. Leaf instantly denies being the legendary healer, assuming she is referring to his master. Just as he is about to seek their permission to accompany them, the monstrous beasts regroup for another assault. The already depleted group faces a bleak outlook. The bodyguard valiantly attempts to shield Priscilla, but Leaf, undeterred and fearless, reveals his unexpected combat skills. He swiftly concocts a potent paralyzing poison, effectively immobilizing the beasts. Following this, he administers a lethal poison, effortlessly defeating the entire horde, leaving the entire group in awe of his remarkable abilities. In the northern border village of Dead End, known to all as the Village of Heroes, begins the story of Leaf, a young man destined to gain worldwide fame. Sitting in a carriage, Leaf reminisces about his time training with his master, until a call from Priscilla brings him back to reality. Priscilla, friendly and inquisitive, asks Leaf several questions, while her guard, Lilith, remains skeptical, cautioning her mistress about trusting Leaf. Suddenly, the carriage jolts violently, throwing everyone off balance. In the chaos, Lilith falls onto Leaf, and his hand accidentally touches her inappropriately. This incites Lilith's anger, and she accuses Leaf of being a pervert, reinforcing her reluctance to trust him. She insists on returning to Dead End Village to verify Leaf's identity. At this moment, Mrs. Merlin appears, vouching for Leaf's origins and abilities. Priscilla recognizes Mrs. Merlin, a powerful sage known for her past feats, including defeating the Dark Lord's army alongside heroes, and her magic that enables humans to fly, which she just witnessed. Excited, Priscilla engages in conversation with Mrs. Merlin, and then tells Lilith that this should be enough to prove Leaf's abilities. Although Lilith can't argue with that, she remains adamant about not forgiving Leaf's earlier indiscretion, continuously berating him as a pervert. As things settle, Mrs. Merlin brings up the recent events in the village. Upon hearing that the fools dared to take over Leaf's shop, she expresses her concern and reveals she had been looking for him. Leaf just smiles, accepting the loss of the shop as proof that he could never be like his master. Mrs. Merlin feels a touch of pity for Leaf's self-deprecation. Anticipating a brighter future for him, she entrusts Leaf with his master's cloak. Leaf, an abandoned child, was picked up and raised by a master alongside Doku. During his apprenticeship, there was a time when Leaf didn't find the profession of a healer very impressive. However, at some point, he gradually began to admire it. Before Leaf's master passed away, he entrusted a special cloak to Mrs. Merlin, instructing her to pass it to Leaf once he made a name for himself. Although Leaf has not yet achieved this, Mrs. Merlin feels that he needs the cloak now. Overwhelmed with emotion, Leaf breaks into tears, then quickly composes himself, realizing that he still has something to hold on to even though he has lost his home. Aware that the village will face difficulties without him, Leaf acknowledges that adventuring has always been his dream. It's time for him to explore the world as a healer, experiencing all that it has to offer. Mrs. Merlin gives Leaf a farewell gift before promptly returning to the village, reminding him to do what he loves and assuring him that she will take care of those who dared to take his shop. Leaf's adventure officially begins at this moment. A gigantic dragon blocks their path, which Leaf mistakenly thinks is just a lizard. This misidentification infuriates the dragon, causing it to breathe fire in their direction. Lilith can only protect Priscilla, lacking the ability to fight the dragon. Leaf, however, concocts a muscle-enhancing potion, leaps in front of the dragon, and delivers a punch that instantly brings it down. Such combat prowess is unheard of for a healer, leaving Lilith continuously surprised by Leaf's capabilities. After defeating the dragon and returning to the carriage, Priscilla reveals her purpose for this journey. She seeks Leaf's help to treat someone who is ill. Arriving in the city, Leaf is overwhelmed by its grandeur, far exceeding his imagination. His excitement is evident as he talks non-stop, much to the embarrassment of Lilith, who eventually has to cover his mouth to quiet him down. She reminds Leaf to remain composed when meeting Priscilla's father, suggesting that he must be as kind-hearted as his daughter. Leaf realizes the importance of not causing any trouble for them. After a tour of the city, Leaf accompanies Priscilla back to the Duke Graham's mansion. Upon meeting the Duke, Leaf is struck by the realization that a title like Duke is typically associated with royalty, which adds to his pressure. Worried about saying something wrong, Leaf ponders how to behave, as his interactions with nobility have been extremely limited. Encouraged by Priscilla's praises, he strives to remember his status as a commoner and to behave respectfully in front of the Duke. After the introductions, Duke Graham, in contrast to the noble Acheron, kneels before Leaf, pleading for his help. Priscilla had invited Leif to treat her mother, a renowned sorceress in the capital known for her dignified appearance and extraordinary power. It is rare for her to fall ill, but a month ago, she suddenly lost consciousness and fell into a coma. Despite numerous doctors' efforts, her condition has not improved and has even worsened. Hearing this, Leif feels a wave of nervousness. Even the capital's doctors haven't been able to diagnose her illness, leaving Leif doubtful about his own abilities to help. Once again, Priscilla and her father humbly request Leif's assistance in saving her mother. Despite their noble status, they are incredibly kind-hearted. With all the confidence he can muster, Leif accepts the task. The Duke instructs the butler to lead Leif to the patient's room. Along the way, Leif silently vows to his deceased master that he will do everything in his power to save Priscilla's mother. As Leif prepares to enter the room, a young man approaches and calls out to Priscilla. She instantly recognizes him as Bacca, the renowned doctor from the royal palace. Bacca has come specifically to examine Priscilla's mother, having heard of her illness. He boldly assures the Duke that with him there is nothing to worry about, claiming that serious illnesses become minor and minor ones disappear under his care. The Priscilla family quickly escorts Bacca into the sick room, leaving Leif feeling out of his depth. Feeling somewhat dejected, Leif consoles himself, acknowledging the superior expertise of the capital's doctors. Just then, Bacca pops his head out and invites Leif inside, mistaking him for a new intern. He kindly allows Leif to observe. Inside, Bacca inquires about the condition of Lady Diana, Priscilla's mother. The attending doctors, who have been struggling to treat her since she fell ill, express their helplessness as her condition continues to deteriorate beyond their capabilities. After examining Lady Diana, Bacca diagnoses her with a seemingly incurable disease called amenorrhea, which severely impairs heart and kidney functions, leaving her with an almost certain chance of mortality. The Duke remains unconvinced by Bacca's diagnosis, recalling a remedy he had once heard of for amenorrhea. Bacca acknowledges the existence of such a cure but explains that its essential ingredient was lost during the war between humans and the Dark Lord. He himself has never seen it. At this revelation, Priscilla bursts into tears, fearing her mother's death. It is at this moment that Leif speaks up, claiming he can cure amenorrhea. Bacca, infuriated, dismisses Leif, insisting there are no ingredients available to make the cure. However, Leif surprises everyone by producing the exact ingredient, which looks just like the one described in the books. Bacca is astonished, questioning how Leif could possess such a rare item. To Leif, this plant is common, growing abundantly in his backyard, but he asserts that he won't need it because Lady Diana is not suffering from amenorrhea. Leif advises Bacca to re-evaluate the diagnosis, pointing out the rapid progression of the disease, which is unusual for amenorrhea. This observation prompts Bacca to revisit the medical records, leading him to agree with Leif's assessment. Leif examines the records himself, and his quick diagnosis and possession of a rare ingredient make Bacca realize that Leif is no ordinary teenager. Despite his confidence, Bacca starts to doubt his initial diagnosis. After examining Lady Diana's blood, Leif concludes that she is suffering from a curse, not a disease. This particular curse, created by demons, mimics the symptoms of amenorrhea to deceive and kill humans. Impressed by Leif's knowledge, Bacca praises him for his expertise. However, Leif faces a challenge. While he could easily counter such a curse in his village, the necessary ingredients are not available here. He decides to use an alternative method, employing the farewell gift given by Mrs. Merlin. Leif pulls out a staff and injects medicine into it, using it to perform a healing spell on Lady Diane. Her complexion visibly improves, demonstrating that the correct dosage of medicine is crucial for treatment. However, this staff is different. It only requires a small amount of ingredient to create a sufficient quantity of medicine for treatment. This impressive tool excites Bacca, who eagerly asks to try it out, but Leif refuses. Lady Diana regains consciousness shortly after, and after reuniting with her family, she falls back into a restful sleep. The treatment is going smoothly, and with proper rest, she is expected to make a full recovery. The Duke's family, relieved and grateful, offers to throw a party in Leif's honor, but he humbly declines, stating that what he did was merely the duty of a healer. Compelled by the Duke, Leaf agrees to stay the night. That evening, Leaf and Baka share drinks, with Baka continuously praising Leaf for his exceptional ability to cure a curse. Noticing Baka drinking excessively, Leaf reminds him to slow down, but Baka, unfazed, declares his need to drink heavily in celebration of his first experience of defeat. Baka admits he never imagined witnessing a curse firsthand. This prompts him to ponder how Lady Diana could have contracted the curse. Leaf's expression changes at this topic, hoping that Baka will keep the upcoming revelation confidential. He then recounts a previous murder case where eye drops had a side effect of causing blood vessels to constrict. A small amount is harmless, but a larger dose can be lethal. Hearing Leaf's analogy, Baka quickly makes the connection. He recalls hearing about the framed murder case but wonders how it relates to the curse. Leaf explains that the curse works similarly to the method used in the murder case. It's likely that Lady Diana was poisoned through her food, and only someone close to her could have done it. Meanwhile, Priscilla, still in her mother's room, reminisces about the stories of the saintly healer her mother used to tell her. She becomes increasingly impressed with Leaf, blushing at her thoughts. Just then, the butler Rudak enters the room. Priscilla, unsure of his intentions, suggests he seeks Lilith if it's urgent, as she wishes to spend a quiet night with her recovering mother. However, Rudak's demeanor suddenly changes, revealing a sinister smile as he declares his intention to properly dispose of both mother and daughter. Priscilla, still not fully grasping Rudak's intentions, is shocked when he reveals his true demonic nature, admitting that he was the one who cursed Lady Diana. Rudak gloats, surprised that someone was able to counteract his curse and lamenting that his plan to destabilize the nation has failed. He no longer sees the need to maintain his human guise and prepares to kill Priscilla and her mother, telling Priscilla not to hope for rescue, as Leaf has already been poisoned by him. In a brave display, Priscilla stands protectively in front of her mother's bed. Despite her fear, she refuses to let Rudak harm her mother. Rudak, scoffing at the notion of family love, raises his fist to deliver a fatal blow to both of them. At that moment, Leaf suddenly appears and kicks Rudak in the face. Leaf didn't expect Rudak to reveal himself so openly, saving him the effort of investigating each suspect. Rudak is bewildered to see Leaf alive, having been certain that Leaf had fallen victim to his lethal poison. Realizing the tea was poisoned, Leaf laughs, revealing that he's immune to all toxins after training with his master. Mocking Rudak, Leaf infuriates him further. So what if you're a healer? Rudak sneers, surviving once doesn't mean you'll survive again. He attacks Leaf from behind, unleashing a flurry of powerful blows while boasting about the demon race's invincible strength. But to his shock, Leaf remains unharmed. It's not that the attacks aren't landing, Leaf is healing instantaneously, using a technique that pushes his body beyond its limits, rendering him invulnerable to injury. As for the poison, Leaf decides to teach Rudak a lesson. With a wave of his hand, he paralyzes Rudak, rendering him immobile. Realizing he's outmatched, Rudak resorts to pleading pathetically, promising to return to the demon realm. Leaf, unfazed, comments on the beauty of the full moon and how it's said to worsen one's mood due to blood vessel constriction. He then presses his hands on Rudak, expelling all the toxins from his body, effectively stripping him of his powers. With his strength gone, Rudak flees immediately. After Rudak's departure, Priscilla rushes to the scene, grateful once again for Leaf's intervention. She embraces him, determined to repay her debt of gratitude. Leaf, however, is left bewildered, sitting in the bathhouse, trying to make sense of the events. Priscilla offers to scratch Leaf's back as a way of expressing her gratitude, which embarrasses him greatly. He sits quietly, feeling awkward, while Priscilla tries to reassure him, saying it's just her way of saying thanks and urges him to relax and enjoy it. This is Leaf's first experience of such a gesture, and he finds it almost too much to bear. Priscilla herself had mustered a lot of courage to offer this and is surprised by Leaf's discomfort. Despite her best efforts to continue, Leaf quickly stands up in haste, dropping his towel in the process and exposing himself, which makes him run away in embarrassment. Priscilla catches him, confessing that she has fallen ill with love for him. Bravely, she embraces Leaf and proposes marriage, hoping he will accept. Leaf, apologetically, declines and explains his conversation with Mrs. Merlin about his plans to travel the world, meet new people, and one day inherit the title of Saint of Medicine left by his master. He clarifies that it's not because he dislikes her but because of their different statuses and his own journey ahead. Instead of being upset, Priscilla smiles brightly, understanding Leaf's feelings and vowing to support him wholeheartedly. She playfully warns that she won't let the title of his wife slip away, especially after having seen all of him. The next morning, Leaf departs, with the Duke's family bidding him farewell. They feel deeply indebted to Leaf, unsure if they could ever repay him, as he saved the life of the king's sister. Unaware of the magnitude of his deed, Leaf continues his journey and reaches the comet shop run by Mrs. Merlin's granddaughter, keeping his promise to return to Priscilla someday. The Duke's family watches his departure with deep regret, aware that they owe Leaf a great debt, one that might never be repaid in their lifetimes. Thus ends the chapter at Duke Graham's mansion, with Leaf continuing his journey, oblivious to the significant impact he's made.